When a relationship with a narcissist ends and an unexpected wall of silence suddenly takes over, most people naturally assume the chapter is finally closed. You notice the coldness, the absence of messages, or perhaps small signs that they appear to be enjoying their life, and you convince yourself they have completely moved forward. But be careful, because that assumption can become a serious mistake. In reality, a narcissist may struggle to emotionally release someone once they feel they have lost control over that person. While a healthy individual usually processes a breakup by accepting the ending and slowly detaching, a narcissistic pattern can operate very differently. The person may remain intensely focused long after the relationship has physically ended. This fixation is not necessarily about love, romance, or authentic emotional connection. Instead, it can come from losing the attention, admiration, validation, and emotional reactions that once reinforced their sense of importance. What keeps them mentally attached is often the sudden loss of influence, access, and control. To a narcissist, you may not have been experienced as a completely separate person with independent needs and boundaries. You may have been treated more like an extension of their identity, someone expected to reflect their importance while carrying the emotional burden they refuse to face themselves. When you finally walk away, create firm boundaries, stop responding, or refuse to participate in their games, you are not simply ending contact. You are removing a source of emotional reinforcement they had come to depend on. That can create a painful injury to a fragile sense of self that they are poorly equipped to manage. Because their ego may struggle to accept rejection, abandonment, or loss of influence, their mind can reinterpret the situation. They cannot easily tolerate the idea that you have regained control over your own life. So the hidden humiliation can turn into resentment, fixation, or an intense desire to regain influence. And here is the strange part. Your emotional independence can sometimes make that fixation stronger. When you stop crying, stop explaining, and stop fighting, you remove the reaction they once used to feel powerful. The calmer you become, the more stable your life becomes, and the less emotionally available you are to their behavior, the more powerless they may feel. They look at your peace and interpret it as evidence that their influence over you is disappearing. And that realization can become deeply unsettling for someone who depends heavily on control and external validation. Do not skip this next part, because this is where the pattern often becomes much easier to recognize. That fear of losing influence can lead to what looks like quiet monitoring. One possible sign that a narcissistic person remains preoccupied with you is an ongoing desire to know what is happening in your life from a distance. Publicly, they may perform complete indifference. They might tell other people that they never cared, act detached if they see you, or repeatedly talk about how much better their life has become. They may even exaggerate how quickly they moved on. But public behavior does not always reveal private motivation. Sometimes the performance of not caring is itself a way of protecting their image. Beneath that outward confidence, they may still feel driven to collect information about a life they can no longer directly influence. This monitoring can happen quietly and indirectly. It might involve repeatedly checking public social media activity, asking mutual acquaintances casual questions, or finding other ways to learn what you are doing without openly contacting you. They may suddenly know details about your life that you never told them directly. They might appear in places where you regularly spend time and describe it as coincidence. They could react to something old on social media and quickly remove the interaction. None of these behaviors should automatically be interpreted as proof of obsession, and context matters, but repeated boundary crossing or unwanted monitoring is worth taking seriously. What matters most is the pattern, not one isolated action. Sometimes these behaviors function like psychological tests. The person may be trying to discover whether they can still create an emotional response inside you. Are you angry? Are you curious? Are you anxious? Do you still think about them? Do you still react when they appear? Their interest may not be about rebuilding a healthy relationship at all. It may be about confirming that they still have emotional influence. And the more completely detached you become, the less information and emotional feedback they receive. That lack of access can increase their frustration. But remember something important. If someone is monitoring you, repeatedly contacting you after you have asked them to stop, showing up where you are, or making you feel unsafe, do not treat it as a romantic sign. Protect your boundaries and prioritize your safety rather than trying to decode their motives. Then, just when you begin breathing again, rebuilding your confidence, and genuinely creating a life that no longer revolves around the relationship, something unexpected can happen. The person suddenly appears again. It may come through a casual message, a supposed emergency, an emotional apology, a nostalgic memory, or a dramatic promise that everything will be different this time. This pattern is commonly called hoovering. The name comes from the idea of pulling someone back in, and the behavior can function as an attempt to reopen emotional access after you have created distance. The timing can feel almost unbelievable. You may have spent weeks or months recovering, and then suddenly they reach out, as if no time has passed. Sometimes the message sounds deeply emotional. They may say they have changed. They may remind you of the best moments. They may apologize for things they previously denied. They may suddenly offer the validation you desperately wanted during the relationship. That can be incredibly confusing, but do not judge the message only by how emotional it sounds. Pay attention to what happens after the message. Are they taking responsibility without excuses? Are they respecting your boundaries? Are their actions consistently different over time? Or are they simply trying to reopen the same emotional door? The purpose of a hoovering attempt is not always genuine reconciliation. Sometimes it is simply reassurance that they can still reach you. They may want to know whether a message can still make your heart race, whether an apology can still make you respond, or whether they can still pull you back into the old dynamic. To them, the exact emotion may matter less than the fact that they received one. Love, anger, sadness, confusion, even frustration can all become proof that the connection still has emotional power. That is why silence and strong boundaries can be so important when you have decided that contact is unhealthy for you. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, and redirect your attention toward your own life, you remove the emotional access that once kept the cycle alive. If they suddenly return, the most important question is not, why are they back? The more useful question is, what has actually changed? And if attempts to regain direct access fail, another strategy can sometimes appear: controlling the story other people hear about the breakup. This is where a smear campaign may begin. It can feel like pure hatred, but it may actually be an attempt to protect an image and regain control of the narrative. When emotionally healthy people experience a breakup, they generally redirect their energy toward their own lives. They may feel hurt, angry, or disappointed, but eventually their attention moves toward healing and the future. A person caught in a strong narcissistic pattern may instead spend enormous amounts of energy trying to damage an ex-partner's reputation. Why? Because your recovery, your stability, and your refusal to collapse can challenge the image they want other people to believe. If they need to appear flawless, powerful, innocent, or superior, your version of events can become a threat, so they may retell old situations in a completely different way. They may leave out important details, exaggerate your reactions, invent accusations, or present themselves as the wounded and misunderstood person. They may contact mutual friends, relatives, co-workers, or acquaintances and tell their version first. This allows them to establish a narrative before you have an opportunity to explain what actually happened. They may also project qualities they themselves displayed onto you, describing you as controlling, unstable, dishonest, dramatic, or abusive, while denying their own behavior. The goal can be to make other people question your credibility before you ever speak. And this is where you need to stay grounded. You do not have to chase every rumor. You do not need to convince everyone. You do not have to spend every waking hour defending yourself against a story designed to provoke you. Sometimes your strongest response is consistency, documentation when necessary, clear boundaries, and allowing your long-term behavior to speak for itself. The people who genuinely matter will eventually judge you by what they repeatedly observe, not simply by the first story they hear. And there is another detail that often reveals how much emotional investment is still present. They may watch closely to see how you react to the smear campaign. They may want to know whether you will become angry, publicly defend yourself, attack them back, or lose control. Your reaction can become another form of emotional information. So do not give away your peace simply because someone else wants to control the narrative. You are not required to participate in a battle that exists mainly to keep you emotionally connected to the past. The more you rebuild your life around your own values, relationships, goals, and stability, the less power their version of the story has over your future. And if you remember only one thing from this entire message, remember this: someone else's fixation, anger, monitoring, or attempt to return does not automatically mean they love you. Sometimes it means they have not accepted the loss of access, attention, or control. Those are very different things. Real love respects boundaries. Real connection allows two people to remain separate individuals. Healthy reconciliation requires accountability, consistent change, and respect for your choices. Anything else may simply be another version of the same cycle wearing a different mask. They will watch carefully to see whether the rumors are affecting you, whether people are turning against you, or whether you finally lose your patience and start desperately defending yourself. What they want is an emotional explosion because your distress can become proof in their mind that they still have influence over your inner world. But here is the part you need to understand. One of the strongest ways to step outside this entire drama is refusing to participate in it. When you do not argue, chase, explain, or constantly correct every version of the story, you remove the reaction they were hoping to create. You force them to face the possibility that they no longer control how you see yourself, how you feel, or where your life goes next. And that can be deeply uncomfortable for someone who has become dependent on emotional influence. Do not skip this part because what happens next can look strange at first. Just when you believe you have completely separated yourself from the past and created enough distance to finally feel safe, an unusual pattern may begin appearing. You might unexpectedly see your former partner at a coffee shop you regularly visit, at the gym during the same hours you normally train, or at a store close to your home. They may suddenly appear at gatherings hosted by people you both know, or somehow begin showing up around the edges of your wider social circle. To everyone else, these encounters may look like ordinary coincidences. You may even question yourself and wonder whether you are simply noticing them more because of your history. Sometimes that is possible. But if the appearances become repeated, targeted, unwanted, or connected to information they should not normally know, it is worth paying attention to the pattern instead of dismissing your discomfort. A person who wants continued access to you may use familiar routines and shared connections to create opportunities for contact without directly asking for it. These encounters can function as psychological reminders. Their presence suddenly places them back inside your awareness and can pull your attention toward the past even when you are finally beginning to move forward. The deeper issue may be that they cannot comfortably accept the idea that you can create a peaceful, satisfying life without them. Your independence can challenge the story they once told themselves about their importance. By appearing in familiar places or using mutual connections, they may be able to create emotional pressure while still maintaining plausible deniability. If you confront them and they genuinely had another reason to be there, they can simply say it was coincidence. If you become visibly upset, they may use your reaction to make you look unreasonable. That is why you should not allow yourself to be pulled into proving their intentions in the moment. Focus instead on what you can control: your boundaries, your routines, your privacy, and your safety. They do not need to admit what they are doing for you to decide that certain behavior is uncomfortable or unacceptable. And remember, repeated unwanted appearances are not proof of love. Someone who genuinely wants a healthy relationship does not need to make you feel watched, cornered, or psychologically tested. Healthy connection creates safety. It does not manufacture uncertainty. Then something else can happen. The moment you stop looking backward, stop checking what they are doing, and begin genuinely investing your energy into your own future, their behavior may become louder. You might expect them to finally accept that the relationship is over and quietly disappear. Instead, you may see dramatic displays of success, happiness, romance, or personal transformation suddenly appearing everywhere. Their social media may become filled with carefully selected photographs, impressive achievements, new relationships, expensive purchases, exciting trips, or exaggerated declarations about how amazing their life has become. They may post romantic pictures with a new partner and make the relationship appear almost perfect. They may highlight career victories or financial progress with unusual intensity. They may share songs, quotes, jokes, or references that seem strangely connected to memories you both share. But do not automatically assume every post is about you. Social media is curated, and people often display the parts of their lives they want others to see. The important question is whether there is a consistent pattern of indirect provocation, especially if the content appears designed to reach you through mutual connections or known emotional triggers. When that pattern exists, the goal may be less about genuine happiness and more about creating a reaction. They may want you to compare yourself to them. They may want you to feel jealous. They may want you to wonder whether they are happier without you. They may want you to question whether you were ever important to them. And if you respond emotionally, they receive exactly what they were looking for, evidence that they can still influence your attention. This is where your perspective becomes extremely important. Your healing does not mean you have defeated another person. Your healing means you have stopped allowing another person's behavior to determine your emotional state. That difference matters. You do not need to win by becoming richer, happier, more attractive, or more successful than an ex-partner. You win by becoming free from the need to compete at all. When you stop checking their pages, stop comparing your life to theirs, and stop trying to interpret every post, you take your attention back. Their performance becomes irrelevant because it no longer controls your mood. They may continue posting. They may continue trying to look successful. They may continue sending indirect messages through mutual connections. But none of that has to become your problem. Your peace becomes stronger when you stop treating their public image as evidence of anything about your worth. You cannot know what someone feels simply by looking at their social media, and you do not need to know. What matters is what your life feels like when you are no longer organizing it around their behavior. Stay with this thought, because it changes the entire meaning of moving on. Moving on is not proving that you are happier than they are. It is reaching the point where their happiness, sadness, success, failure, relationship status, and opinions no longer determine how you feel about yourself. And when direct access is completely blocked, some people may try to remain connected through other people. Once you have blocked a number, removed them from social media, ended direct communication, and established a firm no-contact boundary, they may look for information through mutual friends, acquaintances, co-workers, or even relatives. They may casually mention your name during a conversation. They may ask how you are doing. They may seem strangely interested in your career, your relationships, your routines, or your emotional state. Sometimes these questions are innocent. People naturally become curious after a breakup. But if the same person repeatedly gathers information about you through multiple people, especially after you have clearly ended contact, the pattern becomes more significant. They may be using the social circle as an indirect connection to your life. The people around you can unintentionally become messengers, carrying information in both directions. A friend might later tell you, "Your ex asked about you." Suddenly, even though you have had no direct contact, their name is back inside your mind. And that may be exactly what indirect contact accomplishes. It creates a small opening without requiring the person to risk direct rejection. They can remain distant while still learning what you are doing. They can find out whether you are dating someone new, whether you seem happy, whether you are struggling, or whether you still talk about them. But once again, do not assume every question is manipulation. What matters is repetition, boundary violations, and whether the behavior keeps pulling you back into a dynamic you intentionally left. Your silence can create uncertainty for someone who is accustomed to knowing exactly how you feel. When you stop explaining yourself, they no longer have direct access to your emotional state. They cannot easily tell whether you are angry, sad, curious, healed, or completely indifferent. That uncertainty may motivate further attempts to obtain information. Using other people allows them to remain hidden while still staying connected to the edges of your life. It can become a way of keeping one foot near the door without having to openly knock. And if they know that mutual friends will eventually mention their questions to you, even that indirect connection can keep their presence alive in your mind. But you do not have to accept that role. You can tell trusted people that you prefer not to receive updates about your ex. You can ask friends not to share personal information about you. You can tighten your privacy settings. You can change routines if necessary. You can decide that your emotional life is no longer public information. These are not games, they are boundaries. And boundaries become especially powerful when they are consistent. You do not need to announce them repeatedly, you simply live by them. There is another pattern that can become even more revealing, constantly rewriting the past. Instead of accepting that the relationship ended, acknowledging their mistakes and allowing both people to move forward, a person trapped in a narcissistic pattern may repeatedly reconstruct the story until they are always the victim and someone else is always responsible. They may remember themselves as the perfect partner who was mistreated. They may erase the moments when they caused harm. They may turn your reactions into the central problem while ignoring what caused those reactions. They may tell different versions of the story to different people depending on what protects their image most effectively. Over time, the original relationship becomes buried beneath layers of revision. And this is why you should not spend your life trying to force every person to accept your version. You know what you experienced. You can speak honestly when necessary. You can correct important lies when there are real consequences. You can protect your reputation when it genuinely matters. But you do not need to spend every day fighting an endless courtroom inside your own mind. The past does not become more true because someone repeats their version louder. Your reality does not disappear simply because another person refuses to acknowledge it. Sometimes the healthiest response is to stop arguing with someone who benefits from keeping the argument alive. Your future does not require their agreement. Your healing does not require their apology. And your identity does not need to be approved by someone who once tried to define you. The moment you understand that, the past begins losing its grip. They may repeatedly return to old arguments, reshape obvious facts, and present themselves as the misunderstood, mistreated, or deeply wounded person in the relationship. It can seem as though the emotional story between you is still open because they refuse to let it end until they can rewrite the final chapter in a way that protects their image. Their focus becomes winning the story at almost any cost. If they manage to contact you, or if they find another person willing to listen, the message often follows the same pattern. They may say, "It wasn't really that serious, you're making it sound worse than it was," or "You misunderstood everything I said and did." But there is a reason this happens. Your clear memory of what actually occurred can threaten the image they have created of themselves. If your version of events is accurate, then the perfect identity they want others to believe in becomes much harder to maintain. So they may repeatedly reshape the past until the story feels safer to them. When a false version is repeated often enough, a person can eventually convince themselves that it is true. The healthiest response is not to enter an endless argument over every detail. You do not have to participate in every attempt to rewrite your experience. You do not have to spend your life proving what happened to someone who has already decided what they want to believe. When you stop debating, stop defending every detail, and stop trying to force them to admit the truth, you remove the emotional reward that can keep the conflict alive. Your silence does not mean you agree with their version. It simply means you have decided that your peace is more valuable than another argument. And that can be one of the strongest decisions you make. Because once you stop allowing someone else to determine what you think, feel, or remember, they lose access to the part of you they were trying to control.